Welcome to Leadership Coaching, the podcast, which builds on conventional wisdom and adds a fresh perspective on this ever-evolving field of coaching. Have we been misunderstanding leadership all along? Traditionally, we ascribe leadership to certain people, but what if leadership lives in relationships instead? If you've been struggling with your identity as a leader, it may be that limitations of an old model just don't fit. Join leadership coach Dr. Martin Kettelhut and results coach and certified IFS practitioner Bill Tierney as we discuss the nuances of leadership as relation. The Leadership Coaching Podcast, awakening the confident and compassionate leader within.
Well, welcome to another episode of the Leadership Coaching Podcast with my partner, Dr. Martin Kettelhut, and our special guest today, Norah Edelstein. This is the second attempt at me getting your name right. I've only known you for, 9 years? I should maybe have it right. Norah Edelstein, a fellow coach and part of our Friday morning coaches mastermind group that's been meeting for longer than I've been part of it. How long, Norah?
Maybe 10 years.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I've been in it for 9 years. Marty, you've been in it for 8, right? 7 or 8?
Something like that, yes.
Yeah. So let's introduce Norah. What do we know about Norah? Norah, I know just because what Norah's told me that she graduated from accomplishment coaching in 2005. She's been coaching for 20 years now, and that she specializes in ontology, being-based coaching. But what I know about Norah is what she brings to our mastermind conversations, where we show up and say, hey, I've got a challenge and I'd like to be supported. And some of that support comes from Norah when I bring my challenges. Sometimes it comes from you, Marty. Sometimes it comes from Paula or Jeff. But Norah is an amazing, powerful coach, and she likes working with leaders and corporations, and in those corporations, from the receptionist and mailroom all the way up to the top leader. She also told me before you jumped on, Marty, that she likes working with people that are moving into their 30s and transitioning into, that what life looks like when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you'd like?
Well, I can add to that.
Yeah.
I've actually used Nora's services myself around this topic for today, which is project design. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm very happy to have her here today, because I've used her brilliance on this topic and with great success. So,
Norah, how are you doing as we're getting ready to have this conversation? How are you feeling?
I'm doing great. I'm just so grateful I'm so grateful to know both of you. And to have known you for so long. And I'm just so honored to be asked to be on your podcast. And I'm excited. And, I was saying in some ways it's so familiar to be with you because we meet once a week. And so to shift the context to a recorded call is, I don't know if it's different, but I'm just going to relate to it as a conversation that I love having with you guys.
Great. Yeah, context is decisive after all.
Exactly.
Marty, since you have so recently had an experience with Norah in project design, I think I'd like to hand the baton to you and have you take the lead and let me support you as you kind of interview Norah and talk more. Norah mentioned before we hit record and before you signed on that she listened to our part 1 project design and had a concern that we might be redundant here. And I told her, yeah, we could be for sure, but that we could have 30 conversations about project design, and each of them would be somewhat different and helpful. So let me hand it off to you and let me just support the conversation.
Well, let me go right to some of the hearts of the matter then, because, some of the basics might be, things that people could pick up anywhere, but so, for example, it seems to me a crucial piece that counts toward the success of a project design being realized and achieving the results one's looking for has to do with this ontology piece, the way of being as you're writing the plan as you're implementing the plan and where the plan is getting you. That way of being is really the fuel that gets us to the goal, I would think. And so I want to ask you, like, do you agree with that? And if so, how does one ensure that from conception to, the celebration party, it's imbued with the right ontology?
Got it. Yeah. So I'm going to give you kind of a long answer because that's one of my favorite parts of project design, is exactly what you're pointing to. And in fact, I think that's how we came to this idea of having me on the show, is because I started talking about project design as a structure for being. And that's, for me, the only reason to have a project design. So in my training, and Bill had the same training, one of the ways we talk about this idea of being is, well, first of all, just the idea that this is not that foreign in our society today, that who we're being is actually more important in a way than what we have and what we do. That we all, most of society goes through life thinking that if we do the right thing and then have the right certificate, degree, credentials, then we can finally be the person we've always wanted to be. And ontology turns that equation on its head and says, no, actually, it's who we're being that has the biggest impact on our life. And if we're clear on who we're being, then we can take actions from there so that we can have things. And when the doing and the having comes from who we're being, that life is just more fulfilling and satisfying.
Yeah.
And the ways to frame this idea of being in my training and accomplishment coaching is that we all have a higher self. In our language, we call that your essence, which is your true self. One of the ways I think of it, sometimes it's before I even came into my body, it's like who I was, it's just these qualities I have and am that go beyond anything I did last week, or, go beyond my behavior. They're actually who I am. And so there's the essence, which is your true
Or your
self.
beliefs, I would imagine, too.
Your beliefs, yeah. So there's your essence, and then on the flip side of that, we all, as every human being in this model, we say has an essence, or is their essence. And then we all have a survival mechanism, which is all the strategies we have to protect ourselves. And those get put in place somewhere between, like around the age of 5 to 7. And the problem is that we forget who we are, and we have constructed this life from our survival mechanism, from this false self. And so, and I'm going to tie this back to project design eventually, but so the greatest example of this from my life is that I was an architect for 20 years, and I could not have constructed a career, no pun intended, an architectural career constructed, more out of line with who I am, right? So
Really?
Well, and not completely, because I think I wasn't really thinking about a career. I just suddenly was on this track. It's like, must go to college, must choose career. And suddenly I'm like lying my way into the architecture department at Berkeley. And it was like, I had no idea what I was doing.
Wait. Did you say lying your way into the
I was pretending I had more experience than I did. I mean, I didn't I was everybody's like, just tell them this and that. First of all, it's like, I'm such a truth seeker all the time that the whole thing was a mess, from beginning to end. But, I think I thought, well, it's artistic and it'll be practical. So, I'll make money. And even though on the first day they said, if you think you're going to make money in this field, you should leave right now. And I just thought, well, that doesn't apply to me. Anyway, so that I started on this very rocky road down this career path that lasted 20 years and was excruciating, really. I got fired a couple times. And it's not that the artistic part I could do. I could do pretty drawings. I love nice architecture, but I am not a perfectionist, and I'm not detail oriented, and I can't stand managing lots of moving parts, and I don't like a huge, especially then, I was terrified of responsibility. So I was in fear most of my 20 years as an architect, and not all of it. I'm exaggerating a little bit. But so I always look back on this with this, using this model of essence and survival mechanism as that was a career I chose from my survival mechanism, from like having this instinct that I had some ability, but then wanting to legitimize it in some way. It was just like, I was so off track. And my experience of life, having chosen this career for my survival mechanism, was just painful. I mean, it was awful. I dreaded going to work. And so when I became, and then when in my 40s, I was doing a lot of self-help, and I mean, I read every self-help book available. I went to therapy. I did a lot of like self-development courses, I think because I was finding life so painful. And it was through that process that I discovered coaching. And so when I got the possibility of coaching, it was, I was just like, there was like a piece of the puzzle just kind of fell into place. It was like, that is what I was meant to do. That is what I want to do. And I have no idea how I'm going to do it. I have no business skills. I have no coach. I actually had been coaching a little bit, but I didn't know it was an actual profession. But and that sounds scary because that I was coaching with no skills, but within the framework of a program, they were actually training us to do what I soon understood to be coaching. So in a way, this is like, so I had this goal, this desire to accomplish something, which was to be a coach. And I had no idea how I was going to do it, but the pull to it was so strong that it was worth all the discomfort and all of the pain I was clearly going to have to go through to do that.
So it sounds like this applies to project design. You don't want to choose a goal that is out of alignment with who you are and what you're capable of, or what you want to be your life to be. That if you're working on a project, choose a project that it lands like, yes, I want that.
Yeah.
And
right. And the three ingredients for me to any project design is that it's inspiring. Like you were just saying, like, I want that. Like, if I could have that, I want it. The second one is that you have no idea how you're going to accomplish it. Right. It's not like I'm going to get my room organized next year. It's like, it's bigger. It pulls you forward. It's worth being uncomfortable for. It's out of your comfort zone. And the reason why that's important is because otherwise it's going to be business as usual, right? There's no growth. If you're not out of your comfort zone, and if you already know how to do something, there's really no growth. So I knew that the person I had to be a coach was my essence, really. But I couldn't coach for my survival mechanism. I couldn't coach for my protective strategies that kept me small. I was going to have to grow in this process.
And I do just a little bit of reflecting. I want to kind of do some summarizing of what I've heard so far, Norah, and then ask you to just continue once I've done that. So you spent 20 years in a profession that was painful to experience for 20 years. You even got fired, you said, a couple of times. You ended up in that profession because you made a decision when you were in college, and you made a decision to go to college just because that's what you were supposed to do. You were supposed to go to college, and you were supposed to pick a specialty, and you found yourself lying your way into right angles and algorithms and saying stuff that convinced them that you should be there, and found yourself thinking that you were going to be drawing pretty pictures, but being asked to do things that you didn't enjoy doing. But you did that for 20 years. That says a lot about your survival mechanism, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That you're able to endure something so painful for that long.
That's a great point. Absolutely. Yeah.
So life was painful. I'm guessing when you say life was painful, it wasn't just your job, maybe that same survival mechanism contributed to you enduring other aspects of your life that made life so painful that you got interested in the study of Norah. Like, how do I feel better? How do I stop suffering? And finally, you discovered coaching. So how? I want to ask you that. I know it's a bit of an interruption. If you want to just continue with what you're saying and then come back, that'd be fine. But I want to hear about that. How did you discover coaching? And now let me just go to the next piece. You said there's 3 ingredients to a successful project design. And I think I got all 3, but I'm not sure. Number 1, the project itself needs to inspire you. And then you went to the 3 ingredients of a successful project design. And I heard, number 1, it needed to inspire you. Number 2, it's something you don't already know how to do. And I think number 3 is that it pulls you forward, or was that part of number 2?
It's out of your comfort zone, which is similar to number 2. Yeah, that it's out of your comfort zone, which kind of goes along with what makes things out of our comfort zone is we have no idea how to accomplish them.
Yeah.
So maybe it's like 2A and 2B.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to do those reflections, and I would like at some point to hear about how you discovered coaching, but please proceed. I'm kind of interrupting your flow here.
Well, just to sum up how I started this conversation, and that is that the being of being a coach was something that just pulled me. It's like, I know that this will require me to do this. So it was worth going through whatever I was going to have to go through to be a coach. It was like a structure for me to be my essence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
Architecture was a structure for me to continue to be in my survival mechanism.
Right.
It didn't have to be like, that's a whole other conversation. It's like, I could have, if I had the training, brought my essence to that, but it was going to be a lot more work. But the other thing that was missing in architecture is I had no goal. I was just facing a lifetime of a career. My goal was to survive and to maybe get comfortable, in whatever I was doing and not get fired. So that is not inspiring. It wasn't out of my comfort zone. And I knew how to do that already. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. No, that makes the heartbeat to look at it this way. It seems to me like that's part of the answer to my question. Because the project design is a structure for sustaining your essence, right? Or it could be, a way of being. Maybe it's not your essence, like you're building something, and the possibility of building that is that a lot of people get happy or whatever, and so it's not, it's not, the goal isn't to be your essence, although you will be that always, but it's the possibility of serving all those people, right?
Right. Well, yep.
So the reason I ask this question, because this is where I see people falling down. It's like that's out there. The project design is meant to be a structure to sustain that. How does the structure sustain a way of being?
Well, it's built on, if you follow those first 3 criteria, it's built on, it's like inevitable. It's inevitable, right? If I want let's say, for instance, one of my milestones, and I'm going to just pick up on your language because we have actually very, very similar ways of creating a project design. So, and you've already gone over that. So, if one of my milestones is to, especially in the beginning, it's like to have 5 clients by this date, right? The only way I can get there is to do the work, confront the things I'm going to have to confront to be my essence, and also to create a new relationship with my survival mechanism. So
okay, can I just
that's
pause
the missing
right there?
piece. Yeah.
Because I think this is an important point for the listener. Like, the structure, the design of the project is meant to confront you with being in your possibility all the way along. So you don't choose activities that avoid that
Yeah.
or thwart it or something like that. You're purposely choosing activities that are going to call you to be the way you ultimately
Exactly.
want to be.
Exactly. And it's designed to drive up your survival mechanism. That's what being outside if you meet the criteria of being outside your comfort zone, you are guaranteed to meet up with your survival mechanism. And your survival mechanism will come in and try to stop you and tell you it's a bad idea. And what were you thinking, 5 clients? You don't know how to coach. You've never had a business. It's like all the voices of my survival mechanism were right there. So I would say it. Okay, so here's the difference between being in my survival mechanism as an architect and being in my survival mechanism as I move towards my goal as a coach. In one instance, it was just my survival mechanism was just running the show as an architect. In the project design, it was like my growth edge. It was something I needed to overcome to get to this very, very, very inspiring goal. I had something that made it worth it to go through the pain of not just collapsing into my survival mechanism, but what was required was for me to develop an entirely new relationship to my survival mechanism, to first acknowledge I had one, to secondly, get familiar with it, to just like shine some light on it. And most importantly is to not beat it up and create that adversarial relationship with it that I had my whole life. All of us are trying to hide the parts of ourselves we don't like and pretend we're not that and all of that stuff. So the goal is not to shove it away, like is most people's impulse when they find out they have something called a survival mechanism, but to actually get to know that part of you, that part of ourselves. And this is very much similar to the work Bill does with internal family systems. It's like, oh, that scary part of me, that fearful, annoying, gets in my way, it's going to stop me from becoming a coach part of me. It's actually just like this very wounded, sad, scared, part of me that needs my compassion for my essence. Right. And so that's where the growth is. It's like, it's not just, oh, I'm going to create this great thing for my essence and then I'm going to be my essence all the way through. It's like, no, it's like when you, and I'm still in process on this, I think we all are, when you have a way to soften your relationship to the parts of you that you don't like, it's like anything is possible. It just opens up a whole new world.
And that's the point of doing a project. And the point of the design is to create those opportunities for growth.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important. It's outside your comfort zone. Yeah.
Right.
That won't happen if it's not outside your comfort zone. I don't
think. And I just want to put an exclamation point on this, and then I'll back away and let Bill talk. It's going to come up even as you sit down to design the project. It's going to be right there. So that's supposed to happen if you're going to grow.
Exactly. I have many clients tell me they cried when they wrote their vision, which was part of the project design, that it just, because we're so used to operating into the box of our survival mechanism that we don't even play in this other realm. We don't even pretend like we could have, a different life or a different outcome. We're not like children going, I'm going to be a fireman and a ballerina. It's like we've completely lost that, most of us. We're just like, well, what can I do? And our whole life is like limited by the box we put ourselves in through it's just human nature.
Yeah.
And so stepping outside of that and risking, I think it's a question of risking humiliation and embarrassment by actually dreaming of something that you want so badly that you don't feel like you have access to from the lens of your survival mechanism. It can be painful and hopeful and liberating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's a fear of humiliation.
Yeah.
That can show up. But I would say it's also a fear of having to experience loss, feeling discouraged and disappointment. having to let go of that dream, that's painful. And
Yeah.
most of us don't know, we haven't had grief modeled to us very well.
Yeah. Totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me just do a little review again then. So I'm hearing when you're identifying a project, that project is going to come out of the vision. Is that accurate? You start with a vision and then the project comes out of the vision?
I was listening to your conversation. It's like whether you start with the objective or the vision, like the possibility. I call what you're calling possibility is I call the objective. It's like the emotional juice. Like, why is that important to you? What the fulfillment of that, as you said, why is that important to you? That's like the real core of it. Sometimes you get there by writing a vision of by asking someone, what's your ideal life? Like, tell me about a day in the life of your dream life, and it starts with, I wake up in my silk sheets with the sun coming through the window next to my favorite person in the world. And I'm excited to get out of bed. And, so I think it doesn't, like the vision and the objective kind of, or the possibility, as Marty called it on your call, which I totally agree with that terminology, kind of work together. And even SMART goal, even like what you're going to be measuring can also come out of your vision. Like you might have an objective and think, well, I don't know, my objective is having my work be an expression of my essence, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it might not be clear what you're actually going to measure. And then you start writing your vision as like, letting it flow, letting yourself just be in that creative space. And from that, you might think, oh, what's part of that? Like cooking every night, or it's like, I don't know, like something you weren't even thinking about, like having a garden or, so they all work together in a symbiotic relationship.
I should probably have mentioned this earlier because you've referenced it a couple of times now. Norah is referring to episode number 40, Project Design Part 1, that was just between Marty and I, and that was in season 1 when we were calling the podcast Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching. This is episode 45. Since then, we've rebranded. We're in season 2, and now it's called the Leadership Coaching Podcast. So if you want to check out that earlier conversation so you know what Norah's referring to, please do that. Episode number 40.
And I'm happy to do, to go over my version of all these pieces and how they work together for me, if that would be useful, or you can just refer to that.
Well, we've got about 13, 14 minutes left here, so maybe we use the time for that. But I suspect that there's probably other things along the lines of more conversation around being. For example, identify this idea of, and I can just almost feel the fear from the listener as we talk about how a good, successful project design starts with identifying a project that will trigger your parts, IFS language, that will drive up your survival mechanism. So I really love what you said about why would we want to do that? Well, it's because the survival mechanism will collapse any possibility if it's allowed to run the show. And we can just assume that the project itself and the vision itself so far haven't been possible because survival mechanism to some degree has been running the show. So we want to bring it up, but rather than fighting it and resisting it, knowing that it's going to persist and get stronger when it does, and rather than just giving up and surrendering to it, what there is to do is, number one, as you said, acknowledge that we have a survival mechanism, and now begin to distinguish it by becoming very familiar with it. What I tend to do is this in this situation. I just noticed today that this happened in this situation. When I consider what might be required of me in order for this project to be successful, this is what happens inside me. And this is what I want to do. And this is what I usually do because I want to do that, because it's of the way it feels inside.
Yeah.
And then to develop, and I'd like to use at least some of our additional time to talk about this. So now we've distinguished the survival mechanism. We recognize, what is it that I do to sabotage so that I don't have that life that I want? How do you develop? So I know I use internal family systems for this. I'm curious about how you do it. How do you develop that non-adversarial, that friendly relationship with your survival mechanism?
Yeah. I mean, like all good coaches, I have a lot of good questions for that part of me. And so here's just some of the things I've collected from my experience of helping people work with their survival mechanism and my own. And the first thing is if I'm in my survival mechanism, something scared me. So just knowing that. So instead of, normally I would be like, oh, why do you feel that way? Just all the negative self-talk. I'd go, oh, wow, you got scared. Like, what happened right before you got scared? That can be something like I felt like that person didn't like me. That's one of my sensitivities. Or they're mad at me. Oh my gosh, don't ever be mad at me. It's like, oh, I said something, and that person's mad. That can send me down, my survival mechanism. But the thing that's less obvious is sometimes what happens is really great. Like sometimes, like you get 2 clients in one day and you're like, you can have an attack of your survival mechanism because your survival mechanism's only goal is to keep you safe. And that got put in place at a very young age. So having 2 clients is very risky to your survival mechanism. And it's just on high alert, high alert, high alert. It's like, no, that was such a bad idea. So sometimes you barely get to enjoy the success that you put down as a milestone because your survival mechanism might just be like, this is too much. You're not going to be able to handle it. Let's go back into our comfort zone. So just understanding that and stepping in is, I think in an internal family system, it's like the true self or the adult can come in and comfort that part of you that's just like a scared kid. Your survival mechanism is just a scared kid. And just, it's like, I got this. It's like, you don't have to worry about this. You can go play and do things that are appropriate to your age, So, so that's one thing, just realizing it's fear, knowing that fear can be, triggered by bad things happening or, or familiar things happening, or familiar in the sense of familiarly triggering, and also something good happening. So that's like one example.
Mhm.
So it's just working with it and realizing it's just, that's kind of my best example. I know I have a whole series of questions I give my clients to kind of address their survival mechanism, but it does take like a very high level of consciousness
Mhm.
and a commitment to work through it,
Mhm.
right? It's not about avoiding your survival mechanism or distracting yourself from it. You gotta, it's like it takes time and space and intention to work on the relationship, like any relationship.
Mhm.
It needs your
Mhm.
attention.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And over time, it's less and less attention, hopefully. No.
Well, it's like exercising a muscle.
Yeah.
What I notice with myself when I'm being supported with IFS and with my clients that I support with IFS is that it's like there's more spaciousness. It's lighter. They're still going to get activated, but they're going to be less likely to be deeply rooted and committed to that activation. Like a
Yeah.
wise adult, as you say, shows up with
Yeah.
all these resources. The parts think, oh, thank God, thank God
Yeah.
somebody else is here to handle this. This is too much for me.
Oh,
Mhm.
and you just remind me of something critical that especially, I think this is something that I would say this makes me unique as a coach, and you guys hopefully agree with this. It's like I bring so much humor to the fact that we have a survival mechanism. And even in our training, we name it really outrageous things. Like one of mine is blood-sucking zombie. And so, that sounds crazy, kind of, you guys would never say, oh, Nora's such a blood-sucking zombie, but I know exactly what that means. It means that I'm needy and the zombie part is I'm kind of checked out, like spacing out, just avoiding, and needy at the same time. So we
Mhm.
intentionally put these crazy names on it so that you can see it's not who you are. It's just it's a strategy. It's just something you came up with and it had its use. It's not wrong. It's not bad. I bring a lot of lightness to survival mechanism that I think is unique. We can all get very significant about this work and, oh, it's so terrible that you have a survival mechanism, but it's like we are all in the same boat and you might as well have a sense of humor about it. Not all the time. Sometimes something really gets you and you got to maybe do different work. But, realizing that, okay, this is the truth, that the whole point of working with this concept is that to have a choice about who you're going to be in life. So knowing that there's a true self, this is like who I am. The way we get essence is from a lot of people in your life. So it's not you reporting on your essence. So there's a me that goes beyond my impressions of myself. And that I have this strategy, this thing I do when I'm scared, which, in times of my life, it's been a lot of my time. And until you distinguish that and separate that out and see it, it feels like you don't have choice. It's like, oh, someone said that to me, so I have to be upset or I have to do something about it. Whereas you could say, oh, that's survival mechanism. Like from my essence, what do I see as, possible here? Or what is there to communicate? And I actually have a choice at any moment.
Mhm.
And you can choose your survival mechanism. There were times when I was becoming a coach when, I remember my coach at the time said, so you're going to call 10 people. And I was like, I am not calling 10 people. Not in a million years am I calling 10 people. And she's like, well, that, do you want to be in your survival mechanism? Like, yes, I do. It's much more comfortable right now. I am not doing that thing you just said.
Mhm.
And it's not bad. It's just you have a choice. Yeah.
Can I ask, this is a little bit off the topic, but this is something that has come up when I work with clients on project design. It's maybe somewhat more refined, but I think it's a crucial piece. I was taught to design the project from the back toward the present. So, and in particular, in such a way that as you're working it, as you're implementing it from the present toward the goal, that it gets easier and easier. It's like the way keeps getting clearer as you go through it. And so the design is such that the first milestone makes the second milestone even easier. And the second milestone makes the third milestone just like an inevitability. And it gets easier and easier as you go through the project. And I think that makes a big difference in the design.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I had like 3 thoughts going on. I always use this metaphor. If I knew, I used to be in love with Everest, I'm not a climber or anything, but I did actually go to Nepal. But if I were going to climb Everest, the amount of things I would have to do and train, and I would be so overwhelmed standing where I'm standing here. So you start at the top. It's like, I'm at the top of Everest. That's the vision. It's like, wow, I am so proud of myself. I have then there's the objective is like, why is that important to you? It's, I don't know, meeting my full potential in all aspects of my being, and then it's like, oh, I'm standing at the top of Everest. I'm planting my flag. I'm eating my last energy bar or my last, hopefully not your last energy bar. And then it's like, okay, so what would have to happen 200 feet down from the top? It's like, oh, I'd need 2 oxygen tanks and 4 candy bars. And then what would I need, 200 feet down from that? It's like double that amount of oxygen and candy bars. And you're backing your way to the present.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole map is already laid out by the time you finish this process.
Mm-hmm.
And all you have to do is worry about the nearest milestone, which is like, I need to go out and buy a guidebook. That's it. Right. You chunk it down into these pieces and you only have to worry about one milestone at a time. And that's your nearest milestone.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Need to jump in.
And it just makes it,
I need to jump in and let you guys know we got like 2 minutes from our dead stop, Norah. So I'm sorry, and we could keep going. This is a wonderful conversation, but let me ask you this important question. And that is, if someone wants to work with you or has questions for you, wants to get in contact with you, how would they do that?
The best way would be to call me. Can I give my phone number on that?
Certainly, yeah.
Of course. Sure.
310-963-6014.
All right.
That's, I have a website, norahedelstein.com. Bill just pointed out that my booking a discovery session button is not working, so that needs to be corrected. But yeah, just reach out, text.
Say the number one more time.
310-963-6014.
And look at
Great.
show notes. The phone number and the email, the website will be there. Norah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
So
you.
appreciate you taking the time and blessing us with your wisdom and your experience and powerful coaching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for having me. I really enjoyed it.
That concludes another episode of the Leadership Coaching Podcast. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights to fuel your leadership journey. Remember, true leadership is not about you, it's about empowering others. Take your insights to heart and cultivate a mindset that will transform leadership from within your business, organization, or community. Thank you for joining us on this quest to leadership excellence. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for our upcoming episodes, where we explore leadership as relation. Until next time, remember that you have the power to lead with confidence and compassion from the inside out.